Hi, this is Kate and Molly. We're just doing a sound check to make sure that everyone can hear us. You will hear silence for the next few minutes when we will do another sound check. Hi, this is Kate and Molly again. We are just doing another sound check. Please let us know if you can hear us or not. We will be quiet for another couple minutes and do another sound check. We have about 7 minutes until we begin. Thanks, everyone. Hi everyone, this is Kate and Molly. We are just doing another sound check. Please let us know if you can hear us. We will be starting in just under 4 minutes and look forward to chatting with all of you. This will be silent. We will be silent for another couple minutes and we'll do one final sound check before we begin. Hi everyone, this is our final sound check before we begin. We have 1 minute before we are starting, and we are just checking the audio to make sure that everyone can hear us. Please respond in the chat if you can hear us so that we can make sure that everyone is able to participate. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started. It looked like from the chat that everybody was able to hear with audio. If you are having trouble at this point, please let us know in the chat specifically if you're having trouble. Otherwise, we're going to assume that everyone is able to hear. Good morning, everyone. My name is Molly Beestrom, and I'm the current ILA president, and I'm here with Kate Hall, who is a member of the Planning Committee. Kate, do you want to say hi?
Sure. Hi, everyone.
Welcome to the ILA Speaker Preparation webinar. We're very excited to have all of you here with us today. This is also being recorded, and at some point later today, the ILA office will be sending out a link to the recording. So I'm Molly Beestrom, as I said, and in addition to being the current ILA president, in my day job, I am the Education and Curriculum Coordinator for Galter Health Sciences Library at Northwestern University. It's quite a mouthful. Basically, that means I've been an instruction librarian for 15 years, and I do a lot of teaching and presenting. I taught as an adjunct for the School of Information Studies at Dominican University since 2005, and most frequently I teach the user instruction class, which I think has a different name now, but essentially the same content. I've presented at state and national conferences and have given quite a few webinars, and I'm very excited to share some of my experience with presenting with you today.
And my name is Kate Hall. I'm the Executive Director at the Northbrook Public Library. I've been giving presentations at the state and national level for over a decade and have recently co-authored a new book with Kathy Parker from ALA Editions entitled The Public Library Director's Toolkit. My co-author and I have done a series of webinars for ALA on how to run a public library and have an upcoming webinar on managing technology in public libraries. I'm excited to be here today to share what we can do to ensure that you are prepared to give the best presentation possible. We are here today to help you hopefully feel confident in the presentation that you are going to give. So what exactly are we going to be covering today? We're going to break this up into 3 separate sections. First, we're going to talk about how to prepare for your presentation. Because of course, while the day of is important, it's also really important to put all of the pieces in place before you begin. Then we're going to give you some tips on how to actually give a successful presentation and end with what to actually do on the day of. We will have plenty of time for questions at the end, but feel free to share those in the chat, and then we will go through them as we get to the end.
I'm getting some information that audio got kind of quiet.
Oh, can everyone hear us okay? Okay, we're going to continue on, and hopefully audio will continue to be good. So we want to begin by finding out a little bit more about all of you. So we have a poll that we're going to pop up and ask you to take to give us a sense of what you're hoping to gain today. Have about 30 seconds to complete it, and then it will take another 30 seconds or so to tabulate. So we will have just some awkward silence for just a little bit.
Oh, it doesn't look like it's open for voting, so, oh, never mind.
All right, so it'll just take a few seconds to tabulate, and it looks like we have a number of first-time presenters, which is great. We hope that you'll get some helpful tips from this. Some nervous presenters, and I think that all of us have been there at some point or another. And we have a number of seasoned presenters. So Molly and I, while we do like to think that we know what we are talking about today, know that we do not have all the answers. So please, seasoned presenters, feel free to chime in with ideas and tips in the chat and share your knowledge so that we can help those newer presenters as well.
Okay, so we're going to start out today by talking about preparation, and we have a few key components for preparing for a conference presentation that we'll be covering. So we're going to start with why. Why are you presenting? You submitted a proposal. You thought you had a good reason for doing that. We on the committee thought it was a good idea. So who is your audience? What are the outcomes that you're hoping to achieve with your presentation? And why does this topic matter? So let's talk about each of those for a second. The audience, remember, at ILA conference includes public, academic, school, and special librarians, as well as public library trustees. So while your presentation may be related to your specific library, keep in mind the audience that's going to be present at your presentation at ILA. The outcomes, do you want everyone to be able to go home and replicate your idea, or are you hoping that people will glean something from your idea or project or program and be able to adapt it to their library? Keep in mind that not everybody will be able to replicate your exact idea or program. So think about how people can adapt things and consider that when you're thinking about your outcomes. Additionally, why does your topic matter? Again, how does this relate to other libraries and other library types? And can you help the audience think about how this might apply to them? Even if it may seem like a daunting task to apply a project that you've made successful, it's often useful to relate how this may have failed in earlier iterations, or how you may have encountered some challenges and overcome them, so that they can think about how that might apply to their situation.
Now we'd like to hear a little bit more from you. We obviously know what all of the presentations are about, but we'd like you to share in the chat what you are presenting on and why you were interested in presenting on this topic. We think we have a really great lineup this year, so we're excited, but would like you all to share with each other what some of those topics are.
You can go ahead and do that in the chat. Don't be shy.
Oh, community outreach is such a good one, and patron-focused collection development.
Narcan training, very important stuff.
Yes. Oh, a year-long adult reading. That's very cool. And we loved all of the talks that were crossed library type. We really were striving to get a lot of that. So it looks like we have stuff ranging from fun stuff like book bikes to fair use, which is also critically important. And I think just goes to show the wide range of things that libraries have to be aware of. So
they're coming really fast now, so it's a little bit hard to keep up, but homelessness in the library, this is not what I thought I'd be doing, career shifts in librarianship. That's great.
That's cool. And I think at the heart of all of this, it is about serving our patrons, and that's what I'm seeing here. It's all about focusing on how can we better serve them, and part of that is us making sure that we're up to date with all of the laws and making sure that we're moving the library forward. So yeah. Oh, Generation Z. I do not know exactly what generation I'm supposed to be in. I find that very confusing. So I should probably go to that. I don't think I'm Generation Z, though.
Yeah.
So great. Oh, these all look so good. This is always the problem, though, right?
Yeah.
Too many choices. So, well, thank you guys all so much for sharing. Please continue to share in the chat as we continue on with the presentation. Again, it isn't just about what Molly and I are here to share, but what you can share with each other. So after you start with why, you know why you're doing it, but then you have to choose a format. And as Molly mentioned, making your presentation applicable to a wider audience is really important. So kind of look at it from a 10,000-foot view. Make sure you consider how to scale up or down, or how maybe someone doing something in a public library might apply to an academic library, or vice versa. People are generally looking for what they can take back and use at their libraries. So your role as the presenter is to make that as easy as possible for them, to take what they are sharing and use it. I always tell my staff that one of the goals of going to a conference is to leave with 3 concrete takeaways. It might be just learning about a new law that you weren't aware of with like public domain and fair use, or it might be a new craft that you can do in story time. But you want to have 3 things. And so as the presenter, it's good to think about that so that you're making it a little bit easier. We're getting so much information at the conference. We want the presenters to be able to help the attendees a little bit. You also have to think about, kind of what it means when you are presenting individually as part of a panel, or if you are bringing in people from outside the library world. I saw we had an author who's going to be talking about diverse books, which is fabulous. That is something that we want to make sure that you think about when you are planning your presentation. You also want to consider accessibility. We're going to be talking more about how you can make your presentation more accessible, but you want to consider your format when you think, and accessibility when you are planning.
Next is to be engaging. Set that tone with your audience. If you plan on having the audience participate or respond to questions, set that expectation early on by giving people some softball questions where there's no right or wrong answer. You can ask questions like cake or pie.
Or both.
Or both. Or cat videos or Harry Potter memes. Or both, because absolutely the answer is both in both of those examples. If you're not comfortable with audience participation, that's okay too. You also want to be authentic to yourself, and Kate will be talking a little bit more about that later on. If you do expect people to answer questions, be sure to give them time to respond. In fact, it's useful sometimes to give the audience a question prompt before you're actually intending to ask the question. Put it up on the slide, ask the question, say we're going to come back to this in a few minutes, so that they actually have time to think about that. If you just sort of hit people with a question right off the bat, often there's that uncomfortable silence where people are trying to process the question still. So if you would like to engage with your audience, give them some time to think about how they want to respond to you. Photos are also a great way to make your session engaging, so use photos from your library or find photos from open source or copyright-free websites like Flickr Commons or Unsplash. We'll talk a little bit more about creating an engaging PowerPoint on the next slide. In fact, we've got 2 slides for some do's and don'ts for PowerPoint. And when we talk about PowerPoint, I'm talking about PowerPoint specifically, but also something like Google Presentation, which we're using right now. So I'm going to use that term interchangeably. Primary do's for creating an engaging PowerPoint is to proofread. And proofread again, and ask somebody else to proofread it for you if possible. Use minimal text. Don't just read every slide verbatim. That's incredibly boring. People can read the slides themselves. Just use enough text to remind you of your key points. If you're presenting with a group or a panel, make a unified slide deck so that there's continuity for the audience. I know sometimes it's tempting to put a lot of your own design elements into things, but it can be a little jarring if you're moving from one presenter to the next and everything changes completely. Do consider accessibility. Right now, because we're using Google Presentation, we're also using Google Live Captioning. So hopefully you're able to see that if you've turned on captioning. It may just be available.
It should just show up.
So you should be seeing how it's able to capture what we're saying as we're saying it, and also self-correct, which is pretty cool.
Not 100% accurate,
right.
as you will see, but it's pretty close.
And it does a good job. Also think about fonts and text colors, which I'll talk about a little bit more on the next slide. And then finally, somebody from the ILA office has probably sent out information about the Speaker Center. If that hasn't gone out yet, it should go out soon. So remember to upload your presentation and any handouts you have to the Speaker Center. As far as don'ts, as I said before, don't just read your slides. Don't put so much text on there that you're tempted to do that. There should just be a couple of key points to prompt you as to what you're going to be saying. It's important, and I'll talk about this again in a little bit, to practice your presentation. So you should be familiar with what you're going to say enough that you don't need to read your slides as well. As for using clip art, don't use clip art. There are plenty of places on the web to find images and illustrations that are open source or Creative Commons or in the public domain. So you should be able to find some more interesting and engaging images than clip art. And if you're becoming familiar with PowerPoint, it's sometimes easy to get carried away with the extra bells and whistles like animations or transitions. I would encourage you to keep it simple. Don't distract from the content of your presentation by over-designing your slides.
So now that you have a fantastic presentation, you know why you're doing it, you are going to be super engaging, how do you create the right mood? So I'm pretty casual, and that really works for me, but you need to consider the mood that you want to create. You want to be you. You don't want to try to be like, oh, I'm presenting, so I have to be super funny or I have to be really serious. If that isn't who you are, if that is who you are, then you should be that way. But you want to be true to yourself, because the audience will engage with you if you are behaving more naturally. I know, Molly, we've talked quite a bit about, how are we as presenters?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and I really agree with that piece about being authentic. If you are stepping out of your comfort zone, you're going to feel uncomfortable, and I think the audience will sense that from you. So try to remain true to yourself. Obviously, you may be uncomfortable because you're not a super experienced presenter and you're nervous, but I think that's different than not being true to yourself. So definitely agree, Kate. Thanks for mentioning that.
Absolutely. Now, you will also receive an email from ILA. They have a list of resources to help you prepare. So I encourage you to go through those. Look at those. There's a ton of great information. If you do all of this, you will really be prepared to give an amazing presentation.
Next, we'll be talking about the ever-important and often overlooked habit of practicing. I don't think that Kate and I can stress this enough. Practice as much as you possibly can. Practice by yourself in the mirror or gasp, record yourself. That's pretty much most people's worst nightmare is to be recorded while presenting, but it's a good practice to be able to see what you look like if you have any certain habits that you engage in that you may not be aware of, like flapping your arms as you're talking or standing really awkwardly, which I discovered I did when I was recorded. So then you can sort of be aware of it and try to correct some of those things. Practice with others. Pets make a great audience.
My cats find my presentations very soothing. They nap every time I present to them.
Absolutely. My dog is a great audience member as well. Practice with a timer. Pretend it's real. Don't just do a quick read. Actually try to practice the entire thing from beginning to end with time so that you know how much time you're taking up. And this is especially important if you are presenting with groups. You don't want to think that you're only going to take 10 minutes, and then when it comes to the day of the presentation, you've actually taken up 20 minutes of time for the presentation and kind of cut everybody else short. Practice with technology, including if you're going to link out to a web page or do a live search. Make sure that you are familiar with how that's going to work with your presentation and how long that's going to take. And plan for all eventualities. Bring your presentation on a flash drive, send it to your email, save it in Google Drive, have a printout, and bring all of the laptop adapters that you think you could possibly need in any situation. Do remember that you will need to bring a laptop for your presentation at ILA and plan to bring your own adapter. You will need that computer. There are not computers there for you. And if you do not have a VGA port, bring the appropriate adapter for that type of computer.
So now you have prepped, you have practiced, you are feeling rock solid or maybe still really terrified, but the day has arrived. And so what do you need to think about? Well, the first thing that you should do is scope out the location. So if you've never been to the Tinley Convention Center before, it's a good idea to figure out where your room is before your presentation. Go to it. Take a look in the room. It may not match exactly what you asked for, so it's good to be aware of that ahead of time. It's also good to just get a visual for the space. How large is the room? Is it a smaller, more cozy, intimate room? Each program room will contain a podium, a microphone, a table with 6 chairs, and 2 table microphones. We do ask that everyone use the microphones, regardless if you think you have a really loud voice. I am someone who does have a very loud voice. I still always use a microphone because you do not know who in the audience might have hearing difficulties, and you want to be mindful of that. You don't want them to have to ask you to use the microphone. You should just use it. So please use it even if you think your voice is loud enough. There will be a projector and screen in each room as well, and Wi-Fi. If you've ever been to a conference before, any conference, not just ILA, Wi-Fi is challenging because there's so many people trying to sync and put multiple devices on the network. So if you are saving your presentation in something like Google Drive or in a cloud-based format, do remember that it might be challenging to get it down, so save a local copy. If you need to use Wi-Fi during your presentation, plan to have a backup, maybe using your phone as a hotspot, because while it may be fine when you test it, you might have a ton of people logging in and it might become a problem during your presentation. So if you do all of that, things will be great, right?
Absolutely. Nothing could go wrong.
Maybe.
Kate and I both have had a few examples of times where things have gone wrong at a conference presentation. Kate, do you want to talk about your example?
Sure. So I gave a presentation, ironically about failure, as a part of a panel, and so like we planned it all out. We did have a unified slide deck, so like yay us. But we didn't really do as much prep work as we should have, and so we did not get through all of our slides. We all were people who really enjoyed the sound of our own voices, and all were like, oh, we'll just ad-lib because we're all super funny. Well, what ended up happening was we didn't get through everything, and so we had to rush at the end and through like the last 10 slides, so it didn't give the same feeling that we were going for when we originally planned it. I mean, people were still like, oh, it was fine, and I'm like, oh, damned with faint praise. So this, stuff is going to go wrong. We could have fixed that, though, but sometimes stuff goes wrong that you can't fix.
Yeah. So my example was years ago, I was going to be presenting with a colleague, and at the last minute, she had to cancel due to a family emergency. And so I was going to be presenting without my co-presenter, which was fine. I could handle that setback. But she also was going to be the one bringing the laptop. And so I had to use my husband's laptop instead. And because it wasn't my laptop, I wasn't really familiar with what I needed for it, and I did not have the correct adapter when I got to the conference. And the conference AV department didn't have the correct adapter either. And so not only did I have to present without my co-presenter, I also basically didn't have anything to display. So it was just me talking.
Which I bet was absolutely fabulous.
It was fine.
So I feel like the moral of this story is assume the worst is going to happen and plan for contingencies over the things you have control over, because you're not going to be able to control the things you have no control over. But what you can do is minimize those other possibilities. So obviously, when you're presenting, it can be kind of worrying. So we'd love to hear from you. What do you guys worry about most when you are presenting? For me, I'm always worried the technology isn't going to work. And so I get there as soon as the last conference, as soon as the last speakers are there and test everything. Not that I've had an issue, but
yeah, it's something you worry about.
Yeah.
So what do you worry about most when you're presenting or getting ready to present?
It looks like, that the audience isn't learning anything new. I'm going to just address that, Andrea, because I think that is something that we all worry about, but it takes hearing something 7 times before it sticks in your brain. Think about, 1,000 books before kindergarten, that program. We encourage parents to read the same books over and over. So even if it isn't something new, there is tremendous value in reinforcing something that people already know.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Oh, I talk fast too, Quinn, and I worry about talking too fast and actually getting through the content too quickly and leaving all of this awkward time at the end as well. So that's a really good, that's a really common worry, at least for me as well.
I count to 10 a lot in my head.
Oh.
Because I always have something to say. So when I ask the audience a question, I count so that I don't interrupt and just start. Because I can talk for forever about nothing. It's a talent. So
I see a couple about your mind going blank or so nervous that you jumble words. And I think that the audience tends to be really sympathetic to that type of thing. So if you jumble your words, just forge ahead. Go back and correct yourself, restate what you were going to say, and I think everybody can relate to that. So I don't think there's going to be too much judging for that.
Because most people understand that, we are all here to learn, and I feel like our profession is generally pretty kind. No Rotten Tomatoes.
Librarians are nice people, right?
Yeah.
I think building some small group work, breakout time is a great idea, but I do think it is hard to estimate for time. And in my experience, it generally takes more time than you think it's going to take.
Absolutely.
So I think if you're worried about planning for too much time, I almost don't think that you can plan for too much time. It takes more time than you expect ever. So.
Yeah. I also think getting and holding audience's attention, that is going to be something that is challenging, especially with poster sessions, because there are so many, and you're in the exhibit hall.
It's noisy.
But I would encourage you to not think about it from a standpoint of quantity of number of people, but the quality. I sometimes have only been to 1 or 2 poster sessions, but I've had such fantastic conversations with the people presenting that it really stuck with me more than if I went to every single one.
That's a good point.
So, all right, well, sounds like we all have things to be nervous about, but hopefully we have given you some strategies to help with that, and we have a few more that we'd like to share with you.
So before you go into the room to do your presentation, try to find a quiet place to take some deep breaths. If you're a person who does get nerves, that can be a really useful way. Just use a quick 5-minute or even 2 minutes to just focus on your breathing and calm yourself down a little bit. Try to get there as close to the end of the previous presentation so that you do have the maximum time to set up. And it's also useful to ask those previous presenters if they had any issues with the room, whether they rearranged the furniture or there was some weird loud banging noise from a radiator that they weren't aware was going to happen, or if there were any tech issues. Usually the AV people will be around as you're setting up, so that's a great time to test everything and address any questions or challenges that you anticipate. If you're not comfortable with the technology while there is somebody on site, practice ahead of time and ask somebody to help you set up if you've got a friend who's particularly tech savvy. And don't be afraid to ask the audience for help if you're struggling with something. I was sitting waiting for a panel to start last year at conference, and the way that somebody's presentation was extending or mirroring on their laptop wasn't what they expected. And I was familiar with how that works, so I was able to just jump up and help them figure out how to change the setting. So don't be afraid to ask the audience. There's probably somebody out there who's had the same struggle as you. There will be water provided, but just in case, it's always a good idea to have a water bottle or caffeine of your choice with you so you can wet your whistle if you get a little parched. Consider what you want to do while you're waiting to start. If you are a chatty person, feel free to chat with the audience members, whether it's about the presentation or other sessions they've been to at conference.
Or what Harry Potter house they're in.
Exactly.
Is my default.
That sounds right. Or if you're not comfortable with that, you just want to spend a few minutes to review your notes and collect your thoughts or stare into space, that's fine too. Do remember that the audience wants you to be successful, so don't worry if you stumble. Like I said when we were going through some of the chat concerns, just keep on going. They don't know what you were going to say, only you do, so just keep plowing ahead. Try to find a friendly face in the audience. I don't think that'll be too difficult. Again, librarians are a very nice bunch, so there'll be some people smiling back at you, I guarantee it. As far as accessibility, use the microphone to ensure that everyone is able to hear, whether you think you need it or not, and also consider using something like Google Live Captioning so that people can read along with what you're saying as well. And remember to congratulate yourself at the end. You did it. You submitted a conference proposal, it was accepted, and you did your presentation.
Woohoo! You guys are all rock stars. So today, we covered a lot. We talked about how to prepare for your presentation. We talked about how to give a successful presentation, and then what to do the day of. One final piece of this is that hopefully, especially for all these first-time attendees, or first-time presenters, you guys are going to be so excited and are going to be like, this is the best thing ever, that you're going to want to do it again. Part of learning and presenting is figuring out what you did well and what could be improved upon. To that end, ILA helps because they send out program evaluations to all the attendees, and then they share the results with the speaker, with the presenters. And so I would encourage you to look those over and don't discount what people are going to say. I had someone tell me once, I was presenting with actually my co-author, with Kathy Parker, and someone said, oh, it just looked like the two popular girls just being chatty. And we both were like, oh my God, like, we've never been popular. Does that mean we're popular now? And then we realized, like, oh, so maybe we were just a little bit too informal for this person. But taking that feedback and recognizing how you're coming across can be very, very helpful. So I encourage you to look at that so that you can then use that for future presentations. So now that we have gone through all of this, we'd love to hear whether or not you now feel prepared. So we're going to pull up another poll and give you about 30 seconds to complete it.
And again, there'll be an awkward silence while we give you time to vote. and then while the results are being tabulated.
Oh, it looks like some people can't see the poll. But Daniel, that's great. Thank you. Right. And so, okay, so we have a few people that still feel terrified. We're really sorry to hear that, but we would love to chat with you and maybe connect you with some other people that can help with that.
Absolutely.
So yeah. And that's good that there were people that this didn't give you any new information. We had a lot of seasoned presenters that were here, so we're glad to have you here with us. So that concludes all of our information, but we would love to answer any questions anyone might have.
And it looks like there was a question about not being able to see the beginning of the presentation. Yes, there will be an email going out to, I believe, all conference presenters, but certainly the people that were registered for the webinar with a video of this presentation.
Yeah, and Joshua, to kind of tag on to what Donica was saying, I also like to introduce myself and say, let me know if you would like to learn more about this, or if I can answer any questions. I mean, that's a good thing. But I think asking, because oftentimes people might not have questions, but asking, would you like to learn more, will invite them to get, to allow you to give a little bit of a spiel.
For Jennifer's question, no, you don't have to memorize your presentation. It's okay to have notes, but it is useful to have practiced it enough that you feel comfortable going off your notes if you need to or if you want to.
Yeah. I don't ever memorize everything. I use the notes fields a lot, and the more you practice, the more it gets it. And just remember, you don't have to be spot on. Nikki, you were asking about how early the buildings open.
And it looks like ILA has jumped in and said the opens at 8.
Great.
And you do need to bring your own laptop. You will have to have an adapter for the HDMI.
They will have a VGA cord available. But I think possibly there will be, well, I don't think we can guarantee that there would be an HDMI port on the projectors.
No, I would count on there not being. If they're VGA projectors, they're probably only a VGA hookup, so you will need an HDMI to VGA adapter. And yes, Michelle, I didn't know about the Google Live captioning either until Kate introduced me to it, and it's amazing.
One of my brilliant staff who does a lot of our accessibility work just trained us on it this spring, and now I'm like, we should be using this for everything. And someone asked about parking. There's a ton of parking, like so much parking, and it's really fabulous because, yay, Chicago suburbs.
And it's free, as Cindy Robinson chimed in with, which is fantastic.
Yes. So Quinn, your question about handouts, it's really important if you're doing a PowerPoint to upload the slides. I don't think you need to print them out for people.
No.
They can access them from the ILA site, but I do think that depending on what your talk is, it can be helpful to give like a little bit of information if you want to summarize it. But again, it kind of depends on what the presentation is.
Yeah.
I have really moved away from having handouts, but what I have done is uploaded everything to the Speaker Center, and I've sometimes passed out business cards, yes, with my contact information, but more importantly with the link and a list of what resources are available there. So, Melissa's question, you'll have, you know what, Cindy, can you talk to Melissa about the
Yeah.
poster session?
Hi, Melissa. That's a good question. There will be a poster board for each poster session. So you can just tack up anything that you bring. And then you will also have a table in front of the poster board if you have, anything that you want to put there to support your poster. Hopefully that answers your question, but let me know if it doesn't.
Young, do you mean can you talk during your poster session or have other sounds? You absolutely can talk during your poster session. Please do. If that was the question. If that was not the question, please reframe that so that we know what you mean.
Oh, I mean, I love TED Talks.
Yeah.
And those are really, I mean, they're just top-notch presenters.
Oh, from a video clip. You mean if you have your laptop with you? Okay, yes. I think you could play a video clip, but it may be a little bit hard to hear because it is in the exhibit hall. So
the sound is
yeah,
sometimes a little deafening. Yeah. And then, yeah, Joshua, I would just go to TED.com. There's actually, like the top TED Talks. One of my favorite ones is actually using only one paper towel. It's 2 minutes long, or 2.5 minutes, one paper towel to dry your hands. And if everyone did that, the amount of waste it would eliminate. And it's just beautiful and elegant. And Amy Cuddy is also a really fantastic presenter. Her TED Talk is really great.
I think this was about the presenters at conference, though, Kate, about the keynotes. And I don't know if you would consider them heroes, but they're definitely great speakers, which is part of the reason why they were chosen. So if you want to look at their names on the ILA conference website, then you can Google them to see more information about the presentations that they've given. But Eugenia Chang, in particular, has given some great presentations, and I believe she does have a TED Talk.
Does she?
So, yeah.
Oh, I should watch that. I haven't seen it.
Yeah. And Kathleen, often people roll the posters into a poster tube. There's also a trend to print posters on fabric. So places like, what is it called? Vistaprint, I think, does fabric printing.
So, yeah.
And then you can just fold it up and it won't wrinkle and then you don't have to worry about it. So there are ways to fit a poster into a small vehicle.
Yeah. And then also I think some people don't bring it as just one thing.
Yeah.
They bring it in chunks. So you might have like an 11 by 17, an 8.5, and they assemble it on site, which can help as well. Does anyone have any other questions for us?
Were there any questions we didn't address that we just missed in the chat? Any tips for adjusting to the rhythms of a panel presentation? Practice. There are wonderful tools like Google Hangouts and Skype and other things so that you can run through presentations when you're not in the same room. Kate and I did it earlier this week, and it gave us a really good sense of timing and rhythm and how we were going to interact and trade back and forth. So practice is the best suggestion for adjusting to other people.
I think also having a candid discussion at the outset. Molly and I, this is our first time presenting together. We seem to have very similar styles, so that works really well. But you might have someone that has a very different style than you. So knowing ahead of time and talking about that and talking about how you're going to make it flow can be very helpful.
I think that's a good question, and I think you can almost state up front, I'm going to assume that you know a little bit about this topic, or I'm going to gauge how much you know about this topic by asking a couple of questions. If you're worried about being condescending, I think it's fine to ask how comfortable are people with this topic? How much do you know about it? And say, I'm worried about coming across as being condescending. It's okay to be upfront about it and say that you don't want to talk down to them, but you also want to make sure everybody's coming from the same place. So I think it's a difficult balance, but I think there's a couple different ways that you can communicate that.
So one of the things that I like to do if I'm talking about a subject that could have a wide range of attendees is to do a stand-up, sit-down thing. So I read a statement, and you stand up, if you agree or think it's true or false. You can, so for instance, if you were doing something like, stand up if this is your first time presenting, and then, okay, everyone sit down. Stand up if you're a little bit nervous, or stand up if you're a really confident presenter. Stand up if you're looking for more advanced tips and tricks on presenting. And then that way it gives you a sense of things without having, and you could also do raise your hands and that.
Mm-hmm.
But then it is asking the audience to be a little vulnerable as well. And sometimes you'll get crickets. And that's always awkward, but then you just have to kind of roll with it.
Yeah, I've also seen rather than stand up, you can kind of give a scale. So you can use your hand and say fist to 5, fist being 0 experience, 5 being super confident or super knowledgeable. And then you can ask people, how familiar are you with this particular topic? Fist to 5, fist being 0, 5 being confident. And then you can just see from a range of hands that you may have a range of familiarity, or you may see that everybody is a novice. They may be 0 or 1. And so that can be just kind of a quick way to get a gauge of the room.
And I think also being really upfront and saying, this is for people that have little to no knowledge. This is not going to be an in-depth presentation on, fair use in public domain. This is going to be for people that have never encountered those terms before and don't understand. So hopefully that's helpful, Joshua. All right, any final questions? Counting to 10 in my head right now. Okay, well, great. Well, thank you guys all so much. It's been a pleasure chatting with you guys, and we hope that this was helpful.
All right, thank you, everybody. And remember, there will be a recording of this available at some point later today from the folks at the ILA office, and we look forward to seeing all of you at conference in about a month.
It's coming.
All right, thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.